So thank you everyone for being here. If you are watching this recording following on from the live session, then thank you for doing so. And today in this Lunch and Learn, this free webinar, we are going to be looking at allyship at work, why it matters to us and why it matters to our business. So just in terms of setting that scene a little bit, in terms of, why we're here, what is it that we're going to look at, and a bit of general housekeeping for everybody. So welcome again, everybody. I'm really, really glad that you're here. For those that don't already know, my name's Adrian Thomas. I'm the director and lead trainer of the Resilience and Wellbeing Company. And we specialise in delivering mental health first aid England courses, Thrive Neurodiversity in the Workplace courses, stress awareness, and allyship training and coaching. Now, my passion for all things well-being in the workplace, it comes from lived experience. I live with three formal diagnoses of mental illnesses, a depressive disorder, an anxiety disorder, and a personality disorder, and I'm proudly neurodivergent as well. So today we're keeping allyship practical. We're going to look at what allyship is at work, why it matters to your business, not just your values, but also the business, and a few simple things that you can try straight away following on from this session. So this is part of our free webinar series on wellbeing and mentally healthy workplaces. And if you haven't already done so, I'll encourage you to sign up through our website for further sessions once a month and to share with anyone, anyone and all that you think might be interested in the sessions that we're delivering. A little quick bit of housekeeping before we start the session. As I've mentioned, is being recorded. We will edit out the Q&A at the end before publishing. During the session, please keep your mics muted. Cameras are optional, whatever you feel comfortable with, but we have set them automatically to be off, just to make sure that if you are involved, that you can, of course, make the most of this session. If you have any questions at any times, please just add them to the chat function. I've set some time aside towards the end of our session, around about 10 minutes to look at those. I expect we'll be together around 45 minutes or so. Please don't worry if you need to leave a little early. I'll send you a link to watch the remainder of the session in your own time. And I'll also be sending across a PDF copy of the slide deck. So depending on your own learning style, no need to make notes. You can just sit back, relax, and listen freely to the session today. Of course, if you want to, again, entirely up to you as we go through. So let's start to kind of delve in just a little bit here and start to give you, I guess, a little bit of a quick reference here so that it feels safe and it feels useful. So this session is workplace focused, but we'll talk about patterns that you'll recognize in things like meetings, decision making, and those everyday actions. And just to kind of keep it nice and safe for everybody, we'll keep it to patterns, not people. So we're not going to be looking at any force sharing. You can just listen through to the content. And equally, this isn't a HR investigation space. It's not a sales pitch, although I will mention where deeper learning exists at the end. The goal today is value that you can use and you can take away with you. So just continuing through for us. And what we kind of want to think about really is why allyship does belong in the workplace. What is it that really makes this matter when it comes to well-being? So what we want to think about is that allyship comes down to everyday moments because day-to-day inclusions that people experience, things like being involved as opposed to not being involved. So when we think about exclusion signals, being interrupted, overlooked, joked about, excluded from decisions, those things, they don't just affect culture. They affect the individual stress, they impact a person's confidence and whether they feel safe to speak up in your organization. And allyship is one of the practical ways that we can build that psychological safety, that sense of belonging. And that's really a foundation of well-being in our workplaces. Now, it's important that we give you, I guess, a simple definition around what we mean by allyship. And just like everything, there's going to be lots of different explanations out there. Some very detailed, some nice and simple. But for us, this is a simple definition that we can all work with. So, allyship at work is a practical partnership. Actions that we can take that reduce exclusion and they increase fairness. Now, really importantly for me, and this is what we've built the structure of our training around, is that allyship, it isn't a badge, it's not a personality type. Allyship is what we do in those real moments, especially when it would be easier for us to stay quiet. So I don't consider myself an ally, I practice allyship. And so it's a skill that we can develop, it's a way that we can be in those real everyday moments. But what is it and what isn't it? Of course, this is really important for us to ask. So let's try to just make it a little bit clearer. Allyship is about observable behavior, things people can actually see and feel. Now, it's shared responsibility. It's not just about one area of an organization thinking about it. It's not just our HR or our DI job. And it includes learning and repair because absolutely, we're not going to get it right all the time. So allyship isn't about saviorism. It's about giving people a voice. It's not about saving that person. It's not a performative statements that don't change anything but look amazing on our websites. And it isn't asking colleagues who are excluded by lack of allyship to do the emotional labor of educating everyone why this should change. So it's really important again that we think about these core elements as we think about whether or not we really do practice allyship. Now, as we go through this, please do remember for those that are here for the live session that we will have that opportunity for Q&A. You can drop those into the chat as we go through. But again, we will be sending out information for you following on. And if you are watching the recording, just let us know and we can send you information following on as well. So where do these exclusions actually show up? What sort of things are we actually seeing in the workplace? And you may well be sitting there and thinking, okay, what does this look like on a day by day basis? When we think about exclusions, we see things like airtime and interruption issues. So people being talked over because they don't fit into the majority or through a bias that the group may have, who it is that's getting credit and the visibility. And so it often happens that someone might take credit for another person's idea or another person's input. Assumptions in decisions, something like Mary's always happy to take the notes because she's great at it. And that leads into potential bias. Unfortunately, we do still see in the workplace banter that crosses the line, and this doesn't really need any explanation, I don't think, but it's important for us to think the fact that it can be hidden within closed groups. So, we might not see it in everyday conversations, but actually within small groups, we might hear this. And of course, that leads into those exclusionary moments for those people that may be subjected to it or maybe overhearing it. And of course, accessibility. And this is a big one for me. It could be something as simple as meetings that unintentionally exclude people because of the timing, the format, or even how information is shared. As an example, someone with autism may find it really hard to attend meetings that don't have a clear structure, that don't have notes in advance, and don't have a clear schedule beforehand. These are small moments, but repeated over time, they shape your culture. And when we see these repeated moments, this is where we start to see increased exclusion. Now, of course, there's a business impact when it comes to exclusion over allyship. So why should we care about this? Well, those small moments, they start to build culture that matters to business outcomes. When people feel included, they're much more likely to stay, they're likely to contribute more, and they're likely to speak up early before those small issues become big ones. We can also think about those risks that we might face as an organization. And when we practice allyship, when we practice inclusion, we can also reduce the risk of grievances, burnout. Remember somebody that's impacted by exclusion, that's going to impact their confidence, their mental well-being. And this is where we start to see things like turnover, performance issues. But really importantly as well, there's that reputational damage. If people are leaving your organization or talking about your organization because it's one that doesn't include allyship, that's going to have a knock-on impact in the future. So, really importantly for me, allyship isn't a nice to have. It's one of those really practical levers behind performance, retention, and reputation. So, again, continuing through, one of the things that we really have to look at if we are thinking about allyship is that most workplaces will have plenty of good intentions around this area. However, what we do see often is a skill gap and a lack of consistency in how we talk about or how we train our people on really, really moments that matter. It's important to think, though, that intent doesn't always equal impact. And without shared language, people may overreact, they may underreact, or they may avoid it altogether. And that's why we've built allyship training that works at every level in your organization. So the questions become, what's a simple, repeatable way to actually respond in real moments for us? How can I promote allyship in real moments in the workplace? Now, what we've built, and we're just giving you a snapshot in this session today. Remember, this is a short session that is just designed to give you a broad overview of why allyship matters and to give you some small takeaways that you can practice straight away within your own organization. Now, what we've done is develop a shared language format. And here's a method that can be used in real time. And it's really, really helpful in those moments when our brain just goes a little bit blank. And we've called it the N4 method. So we notice, we name, we navigate, and we nudge. What does that actually mean, though? And how does that apply through to this idea of allyship? So we notice an exclusion and we name that exclusion. We navigate through to a correction. And across our training, we talk about different levels of response, a level 1 to a level 6 response, depending on that situation. And then we nudge the future behavior. Now, it's really important that that nudge, it isn't about embarrassing others. It's about not letting exclusion be ignored. So this N4 method is designed to be safety first and practical and something that you can actually remember mid-meeting when that moment of exclusion is obvious to you. Let's take a little bit of a kind of deeper dive here and look at what that might actually mean. So just adding in a bit of clarity around this for you. This rule makes it really usable. Remember, we notice, we name, we navigate, and in the navigating, we choose the lowest effective level. So what level is going to help me get through this situation? Now, a level 1 is a real quick in the moment. A level 6 may be that we're moving into our organization's processes or disciplinary procedures, etc. So we're looking for the most effective in that moment that's going to have the quickest effect. And then we nudge towards better behavior. We're not jumping straight towards that maximum escalation. We're choosing the smallest safe action that improves that moment. And what we're going to do is we're just going to give you in this webinar a little bit around this level 1 in the moment. It's light, it's public, and we want to give you something from this session today that's just a really, really quick tool that you can take away with you. So remember, we've noticed an exclusion. We're going to call that out by naming that exclusion, and then we're going to navigate. So here we're looking at that in the moment, light, usually public. And this might be things like including somebody that's being left out. It might be redirecting, it might be clarifying, or it might just be about resetting a norm. Often that's enough to shift the tone without creating some drama and to move the situation to inclusion rather than exclusion. What I wanted to do with this session for everybody was give you some really quick, short scripts that you might be able to use. And remember, we're going to send you a copy of this slide deck through as a PDF. So you will have these there for you to use. So scripts that we teach when it comes to allyship. And I'm just going to give you a few of the level 1 scripts. You can borrow these in the moment, because sometimes when we're in this situation where we feel we might want to call out an exclusion, but we're just not quite sure what to say, wording can sometimes be the hardest part. But these are nice, neutral, short, dignity preserving. And remember, the goal isn't to call people out, it's to call them into a better standard. So we're not looking to embarrass, we're not looking to victimize or looking to escalate to a separate level. This is just about in that moment, let's name what we've seen, we've noticed it, and we're going to navigate through it. So a couple of core ones here, we might just say, okay, just want to pause for a moment. I want to make sure that I've heard Hannah finish what she was talking about. Okay, if I can just pause us for a moment, let's move back to one voice at a time, and then what we'll do is come back to you. So this is about maybe where somebody's taking over that conversation. And then again about, credit where it is due, quick credit check, who did work on this, making sure that we pull in those people that deserve the credit rather than those that might be taking it. Now, that might work in our meeting setting, but nowadays we use so many different formats. So I also wanted to give you a couple of little ones that you might use when you're using scripts or your emails, chat. You might be using things like Slack or WhatsApp. And these areas are really tricky because our tone does get lost and messages also linger, they might be misinterpreted. And so these lines do two things. They assume positive intent without ignoring impact, and they set a nice, clear boundary. Now, you know, this might be something that I've written in WhatsApp, for example, if I've got a work WhatsApp group, I know that it may not be intended that way, but it could land badly. Can we rephrase it 2x? Let's keep it respectful. We can make the point without that. So this is where we might call out those elements where somebody's being isolated out in that conversation. Now, there is a really strong debate about, should we look at intent? Should we look at impact? For those that have been following, we've been seeing a really, really interesting reaction in the public domain around the recent AFTA controversy. What we've seen is some very divisive, attacks. Really horrible attacks on both the person that had Tourette's and the person that is recognizing the mistreatment. So we've seen some really kind of polar responses around here. With allyship, we recognize that both sides can be right. We can accept that there was no intent of harm in some actions that a person has, the words that they use, and we can be compassionate to that person. And in this situation that you may be aware of, those uncontrollable vocal tics. But with allyship, we also recognize that while there may not be any intent to cause harm, impact is still significant, and we can show compassion to those hurt as well. So working to support both sides, we don't need to exclude each other. They can actually both have that framing. And so we want to make sure that that's the case. Now, remember, we are going to have that opportunity to have some time around Q&A, and we are aiming for this to be around another 10 minutes or so of content for you, and then we'll be giving that opportunity. Feel free to drop into the chat and just let us know anything if you want to at this point. And if you are watching back the recording, we will also add in a frequently asked questions element for you. So we're talking about using these small micro scripts, taking those moments to call out exclusion and to pull in inclusion. But what if we do get pushback, this intent element that I've just mentioned about? Well, when we practice allyship, maybe using those scripts, that pushback might come through quite quickly. Oh, come on, it was just a joke, you're being oversensitive. However, we do need to think about those standards as well as the impact that it may have. We're not accusing someone of being a bad person. What we're doing is trying to protect a respectful way of working with others. So, a couple of simple kind of pushback the phrases there again for you. I'm not calling anyone out. I'm calling us into a better standard. Let's focus on impact and what we do next. So it's not about kind of creating an environment where we vilify people for the things that they might have said or the actions they might have taken. It's about trying to nudge towards that additional or improved way of interacting. Now, we have said that with our N4 model, we look at navigating through at different levels. And when that level 1 response might not be enough, what do we do? Well, we may need to move up in terms of our responses. And when we are looking at different levels, we look at what it might mean if action is repeated or there's an obvious power imbalance between people, if there's a significant policy breach or a safety breach. And this is when we start to move through and we look at those organizational routes that you will already have in place. What is important here is those of us that practice allyship, it's not about carrying it alone, and we're not trying to fix serious issues informally. What we're trying to do is pick the right method to make the quickest impact that draws people in rather than takes people out. We're going to encourage you, just from what we've learned in this short session today, this lunch and learn session that we've provided for you, to just think about taking away something from the session and what you might be able to do. And I'm going to encourage you to think about a small micro action that you might be able to take from those elements. So I've talked you through allyship, what it means, why it's important, but I'd really, really like you to take away that actionable element from the session. So thinking about this and picking that micro action, something small that you can do even when you're busy, and you don't need to let me know about it. This is a personal commitment to practicing allyship. So, for example, it might be that you look to have a quick interruption intervention, maybe calling out an exclusion element that you see, someone not getting credit in that moment. Make sure that you help others' ideas or inputs to be recognized. It may be a chat boundary, calling out language or a joke that might not land well for others. Or it could be an inclusion by design tweak. So maybe thinking about things like our meeting, is there a way that I might share agendas early or key focus points? So those people that might need more time to think about things actually get those elements. So these are small, in the moment actions. You might take in meetings, it might be in chat, but really thinking to yourself how you may do that, thinking about what it is that we've learned. I am also going to follow this up with those scripts. I'm going to follow it up with a copy of the video, so you'll be able to watch through this again if you wanted to check in on those elements. After this session, we really want you to have that small, actionable element for you to move forward. Now, with this, we're not using this as a big sales pitch for you. We just want to talk to you about how organizations do look at embedding things like allyship. If an organization really wants allyship to stick, it usually needs four things: skills that people can use, team norms that people agree to, systems that make the inclusive choice that's the easy choice, and support so that people don't burn out from doing work alone. Now, we also believe really firmly that it needs a layered approach: awareness training for all, deeper awareness for managers, embedding skills for key decision makers, and then coaching for champions. And this is what we've built our training around. And that's really how organizations move from allyship is important to us to real cultural change, providing those skills, developing those norms, developing the systems, and providing support for those that are practicing allyship. I've promised that I'm not going to keep you a long time in this session today. We're working roughly for about 30 minutes worth of content, so we are approaching towards the end of the content. And then what we will be doing is looking to stop the recording while we look at Q&A. And just want to kind of think a little bit more further. We will share the PDF so that you've got the model, a few scripts. And if you're listening and thinking to yourself, we need to embed this more deeply, the usual step is for us to have a conversation on how best you'd like to embed. If that's the case for you as you're watching, then just reach out to me. No high pressure sell, just a conversation on what your goals would be and how we might be able to support you. But for today, the most important thing I'd like you to take away is that micro action, and try it over the next week. I want to thank everybody that has attended and has watched through this video up to this point, and just it's appreciated that you've joined this short session just to pick up a little bit of information on what allyship is and how we might practice it. I am going to look to stop the recording in a moment, so we will be moving into a Q&A, and just a huge thank you for taking the time to show some interest and develop your own knowledge just that little bit further.